Cannabis Common Sense, the show that tells the truth about marijuana and the politics behind its prohibition.
Hello and welcome to another exciting edition of Cannabis Common Sense. We have a great show for you tonight. This evening, our first guest is Stephen Clarke with heavengrown.com down in Mexico to talk about the changes in Mexico's law that happened just since our last show. And we also have Dan Harrer back on the show, the son of Jack Harrer and proprietor of Jack Harrer Brands and the Jack Harrer Foundation. So we have a couple of great guests, some groundbreaking hemp news in just a moment. So stay tuned as we bring on our infamous dancing cannabis leaves.
I feel the force.
Okay, our first story tonight talks about the United States. This week marks another critical mile marker on the road to ending marijuana prohibition in the USA. Connecticut, New Mexico, and Virginia have all abolished criminal penalties for marijuana possession, effective on July 1st. That means that by the week's end, 14.3 million more Americans live in jurisdictions where the adult use of marijuana is now legal. In all, 145 million Americans are just shy of half of all the U.S. population now reside in states with legal cannabis. But we're just getting started. In South Dakota, we have a double-edged sword here. South Dakota's voter-initiated medical cannabis law took effect on July 1st also. 70% of voters approved the ballot initiative, Measure 26, in November, although patients are not anticipated to begin receiving state-issued identification cards or to be able to access cannabis products from state-licensed dispensaries until at least the fall. The South Dakota Department of Public Safety issued guidelines today for law enforcement requiring them to cease arresting those persons who identify as patients and meet certain qualifications. Specifically, the guidelines stipulate that members of the Highway Patrol, quote, will not, at the scene of a stop or interaction, arrest a South Dakota resident who's unable to present an unexpired medical cannabis card, quote, as long as each of the following apply. The individual possesses no more than 3 ounces of natural and unaltered marijuana. The individual claims at the time of the interaction that the medical cannabis is to treat or alleviate a debilitating medical condition, and the individual produces printed or electronic documentation relative to the debilitating medical condition from a licensed medical doctor. In addition, the Highway Patrol personnel in South Dakota will no longer arrest non-resident card holders for the possession of cannabis, nor will they seize the cannabis or any associated paraphernalia if the following applied. The card holder presents an unexpired medical cannabis card issued by another state, and he or she possesses no more than 3 ounces of natural and unaltered cannabis. Under the state's nascent program, patients with, quote, a chronic or debilitating disease or medical condition, end quote, including HIV or AIDS, ALS, cancer, Crohn's disease, epilepsy, glaucoma, multiple sclerosis, or post-traumatic stress, are eligible to receive an authorization from their doctor to possess medical cannabis. On the other hand, justices in the South Dakota Supreme Court will not decide on litigation seeking to invalidate Constitutional Amendment A, the state's voter-initiated adult use marijuana legalization law, until after it was supposed to go into effect last week on July 1st. That is the date the law was supposed to go into effect. 54% of South Dakota voters decided last November in favor of the ballot measure. Republican Governor Kristi Noem publicly opposed it, and following its passage, her office facilitated litigation seeking to strike the law down as unconstitutional. In February, their select judge, Christina Klinger, of the state's 6th Judicial Circuit Court, ruled in favor of that challenge. Legalization opponents cannot succeed in the court of public opinion or at the ballot box. Thus, they're now seeking to overturn election results after the fact, a typical Republican playbook. Whether or not one supports marijuana legalization, Americans should be outraged at these overtly undemocratic tactics. South Dakota Supreme Court justices heard arguments on the case back on April 27. The circuit court's ruling striking down the law remains in effect until South Dakota Supreme Court either upholds or reverses the lower court's decision. 18 states have enacted laws regulating the adult use of marijuana, and no high court has ever before struck down an adult use marijuana law. Adult use legalization laws took effect in Connecticut, New Mexico, and Virginia last week. It's a travesty that the people's vote was subverted and South Dakota would be here with us, legal today. On another story, the tech industry giant Apple will no longer prohibit marijuana delivery services from being hosted on its App Store, one of the latest pro-cannabis developments to come out of the tech industry. The policy was updated last month to remove the ban, with some restrictions. A marijuana app must be geo-restricted to jurisdictions where cannabis is legal, and the program must be, quote, submitted by a legal entity that provides the services and not by an individual developer, end quote. In contrast, Google's Android app updated its policy in 2019 to explicitly prohibit programs that connect users with cannabis, no matter whether it's legal in the jurisdiction where the user lives or not. The tech industry has had a strained relationship with the marijuana industry, even as a growing number of states have decided to legalize and regulate the sale of cannabis. Facebook, which in 2019 showed off its artificial intelligence technology that's capable of identifying images of marijuana, continues to prohibit the commercial advertising of cannabis products, regardless of the legality of the business under state law. Non-commercial cannabis organizations like ours and state regulatory bodies like the Massachusetts Cannabis Control Commission and the Oregon Liquor Control Commission have also been caught up in the anti-marijuana policy, despite the fact that they do not promote or sell cannabis products. In some cases, it appears these organizations have been hidden from appearing in search results, a practice known as shadow banning. We have a few medical articles now. Out of Sydney, Australia, the daily administration of plant-derived cannabis extracts is well tolerated and improves the overall quality of life in patients with glioma, or brain cancer, according to clinical trial data published in the journal Frontiers of Oncology. A team of Australian researchers assessed the daily administration of cannabis extracts containing either a 1-to-1 ratio of THC and CBD or a 4-to-1 ratio of THC and CBD in 83 patients with glioma, or brain cancer. Subjects in the trial consumed the extracts for a period of at least 4 weeks. Investigators reported that subjects responded most favorably to extracts containing equal ratios of THC and CBD. They concluded, quote, this study provides robust evidence that medicinal cannabis administered to this patient population is safe, well tolerated, and can provide symptomatic relief to those patients. It suggests that cannabis, especially a 1-to-1 CBD-THC mixture, can be helpful for many of the symptoms impacting quality of life in this patient population, especially sleep disturbances. As such, medical cannabis may be a valuable potential therapy for maintaining the best quality of life and daily function for this poor prognosis population, while also assisting patients during anti-cancer and potentially life-extending therapies, end quote. This study, a phase 2 randomized clinical trial assessing the tolerability of 2 different ratios of medicinal cannabis in patients with high-grade gliomas, appears in this month's edition of Frontiers in Oncology. Our next story is from Bern, Switzerland. The cumulative use of cannabis over a 20-year period is not independently associated with increased risk of atherosclerosis, or hardening of the arteries, according to data published in the American Journal of Medicine. An international team of investigators from Switzerland and the United States assessed the relationship between the use of tobacco and/or cannabis and the risk of subclinical atherosclerosis in a cohort of 3,257 patients. The authors reported that lifetime exposure to tobacco over a 20-year period was strongly associated with subclinical atherosclerosis, whereas the cumulative use of cannabis alone was not, a finding that's consistent with prior research. They concluded, quote, this study adds to the growing body of evidence that there might be no association between the average population level of marijuana use and subclinical atherosclerosis, end quote. Previous research published by several of the same investigators report that the cumulative use of cannabis is not associated with an increased risk of either cardiovascular disease or coronary heart disease in middle-aged subjects. Other analysis of nationally representative samples of recreational marijuana consumers have reported inconsistent results regarding the relationship between cannabis and adverse cardiovascular events. As of 2001 study of 57,000 U.S. adults concluded, quote, after controlling for several confounding variables, we found that there was a decrease in the prevalence of cardiovascular events with marijuana use. The odds ratio was 0.74. The result of a 2021 literature review of 67 studies published in the American Journal of Medicine concluded marijuana itself does not appear to be independently associated with excessive cardiovascular risk factors. This study, Cumulative Marijuana Use and Cardioid Intima Media Thickness at Middle Age, the Cardia study, appears in this month's edition of the American Journal of Medicine. In Canada, cannabis use does not appear to have any significant adverse effects on either male reproductive health or sexual function, according to longitudinal data published in the Canadian Urological Association Journal. A team of Canadian investigators assessed male reproductive health in a cohort of nearly 8,000 subjects over a 10-year period. The authors reported that subjects with a history of cannabis use, quote, had a higher mean sexual inventory for men score and higher mean total testosterone than non-users, end quote. They concluded, quote, the present study provides compelling evidence against significant deleterious effects of cannabis use on male sexual function. Further studies, particularly large randomized controlled trials, are needed to establish causation of cannabis use on levels of testosterone and other reproductive hormones, end quote. The full text of this study, The Impact of Cannabis Use on Male Sexual Function, a 10-year single-center experience, appears in the Canadian Urological Association Journal. In Mexico, justices on Mexico's highest court moved today to permit adults to possess and cultivate small quantities of marijuana without penalty. In 2018, the court determined that the sections of the federal law decriminalizing private use and cultivation of cannabis by adults were unconstitutional. At that time, the majority opined, quote, the effects caused by marijuana do not create an absolute prohibition on its consumption, end quote. Mexican Supreme Court justices have provided Mexican lawmakers until April 30th to enact legislation regulating the use of cannabis by adults. However, House and Senate lawmakers did not agree on a plan prior to the deadline. Today's Supreme Court mandated that the Health Department begin issuing permits to members of the public age 18 and older who wish to either possess or grow personal use quantities of cannabis. Activities involving commercial activities remain illegal. With these actions, the Mexican Supreme Court and the United States has become an island of federal marijuana prohibition in North America. Since Mexico has now legalized it for the entire nation, Canada has legalized it for the entire nation. Canada legalized its marijuana market in 2018, and Mexican lawmakers in 2009 decriminalized the possession of small amounts of cannabis, 5 grams or less, and other substances. For our last statement tonight, we at the Cannabis Common Sense Show focus on amending and repealing our nation's draconian marijuana policies that have denied liberty and prosperity to millions of our fellow citizens as a way to help us take another step toward a better and more just United States. Over the last 25 years, we've been producing this TV show since October of 1996. We fought back against punitive laws that have put far too many Americans in handcuffs and in prison cells, overwhelmingly black and brown Americans. We work to help defend those who are denied an education, child custody, employment, or safe housing because of a marijuana charge on their record, and we champion a policy of legalization and regulation to create a new and responsible industry that can contribute to rectifying the harms of the war on drugs. Never forget that, as it says in the Declaration of Independence, governments are instituted among men deriving their just powers from the consent of the governed. Well, the American people are using that power to demand an end to prohibition and that we move on to the legalization of marijuana across the country. We have many new freedoms to celebrate this year, with Connecticut, New Jersey, New York, Montana, and Virginia having finally ceased the arrest of adults for marijuana possession. Unfortunately, while nearly 50% of our population now lives in a jurisdiction where marijuana has been legalized, that means the other half of our country live under the oppressive reign of prohibitionist policies. Even with all the progress we've made together over the years, over 500,000 Americans are still arrested annually for marijuana charges. That's not a reason to despair, however. It's a reason to soldier on with newfound drive. We are winning the debate. We are impacting real change. We're bringing prohibition crumbling down across the nation. We just need to finish the fight. Join us and work and educate that we must restore hemp. We have a couple of interviews coming up. I do want to tell you that if you or a loved one are looking for a doctor or clinic that can help you obtain a medical marijuana permit anywhere in the United States, we have a referral service. Call our office at 503-235-4606. That's 503-235-4606. Now we have an interview first with Stephen Clarke in Mexico to talk about these changes in the Mexican law, and with Dan Herr, the son of Jack Herr, to talk about the building of the Jack Herr brand and the activities of the Jack Herr Foundation. So stay tuned for a great show. Remember, restore hemp. Good night. I'd like to welcome Stephen Clarke back on the show. Stephen is in Mexico. I wanted to have him come on and talk about the recent changes with the Supreme Court and rulings. There's a lot of celebration and disappointment as well with what happened last week. Can you explain what the Mexican Supreme Court did last week?
Yeah, well, thank you for inviting us again back on the show. And yeah, last week we were all hoping for a change in legislation or the Supreme Court voting the unconstitutionality of the prohibition that we have in Mexico. There's 5 articles that they were supposed to attend, and if they would basically take those off the list, which one of them is marks cannabis as a controlled substance, if they would have taken that off, Mexico would have been completely open, completely legal. But unfortunately, they didn't attend that. They just took 2 articles away, which they don't really allow people to, they still need to get a permit. They still need to go to the health authorities. So in a way, it's a step forward from what we used to have, because now technically there will be an office for this, but
Okay,
nothing's really changed. Nothing's really changed. Sorry, yeah?
No, basically it's medical marijuana is now a little better organized, but if people want to grow their own, they're still not allowed to. Is that right?
Technically, with this change, the health authorities will produce permits that will allow you to cultivate, but it's still a catch-22, because what the Supreme Court has granted us is that it's our human right. But you don't need a permit for a human right. You don't need to go to an authority for them to accept your human rights. So this is the part that we're trying to, I guess, solve, because what they're doing is they're saying, yes, it is your human right, but you now need to get a permit. Now, who knows if the health authorities will be granting the permits, when they will be doing it, or because technically Mexico legalized, I guess, the first time in 2017. And the same health authorities had 180 days to produce a framework in which Mexico would be legal, and they didn't. It's been 4 or 5 years since that, and that's why the Supreme Court had to do this action. Now, the health authority is not obliged by the Supreme Court, even though they took away those articles, but they didn't take away the main one, which would actually put the pressure on them to make the proper legislation. With these changes, it's really just, I guess they're preparing to open up commerce in October, if they actually vote again for this. So we're back at the same point that we still need to go and get with a judge. You need to go and ask for a permit. You get denied that permit, and then you go with a judge and you get your amparo. And now it's actually easier. You don't need that denial, because a new trial came out, which is based on stigma. So if you're stigmatized by the use of cannabis, they will grant you that paperwork, which allows you to cultivate as much as you want, transport as much as you want. You can even smoke in open places, as long as you don't affect a third party, basically if somebody doesn't like it, or that there's underage people around. So it is a very good step forward, I guess, but we're still facing a government that doesn't really want to legalize. So even though the judicial system has told them that they have to, they're still not doing it. So I guess it's a step forward, but hopefully, I don't know, we'll see if they actually start granting those permits.
Yeah. So for our audience that doesn't really know, back in, was it 2017 that the Supreme Court of Mexico said that marijuana is a legal right, and therefore you have to allow it. And they gave the legislature several deadlines, right? Like how many? Like, huh?
Three to be precise, three extensions. They got two granted because of COVID, which they said that they weren't working and all that. But before that, they had to start doing it since 2018, and they just didn't. So we're at that point that even though our judicial system is telling them that we have to do it, that we have to change the law, they're still not in their agenda. There's other things that we know it's not a capacity thing or a capability thing because, for example, when Mexico, with this new free trade agreement with the US, we had to modify many things in our laws. We even had to modify that Mexico can now legally patent plants, just like the US. We're one of the few countries that we can actually patent genetics. Just saying corn is mine, it's very crazy. But um, all this paperwork, which normally takes a lot of time, was sorted out in probably less than 2 weeks. It went from senators to the other guys, the Congress, the diputados,
Chamber of Deputies, or like the House of Representatives?
yeah, like the House of Representatives, and they did the three parties. They all signed off on it, and Mexico is now officially with the free trade agreement in the states. So all we're saying is, if this is an issue that started since 2008, since 2008, Mexico has been trying to legalize, and the Congress talks about it, and the governments, and now the Supreme Court has mandated it. We have technically a legality for medical cannabis in Mexico, which only pharmaceuticals can access, but still, it's almost or virtually impossible to grow in Mexico without one of these paperwork that we have, because it's really not on the agenda. So I guess it's good news that it started. It's a good moment for Mexico. I guess now we have more on our side for our human rights. And that's something that we really want to push for in Mexico, because our human right doesn't finish just in Mexico. And if it's a human right for us, it's a human right for everybody. So just like Colombia changed the world with cannabis at some point, and just like the US has led the spearhead in all this new cannabis revolution, we believe that now Mexico can, I guess we can put our spoon worth of it by proving to the world, or showing to the world, that it's a human right, that it's just a plant. It's just just another plant, just like I don't know, coconuts or bamboos, or sorry for our references in Mexico. It's just like, it could be like corn or anything. So hopefully we can keep on pushing this, and we can keep on showing the world that prohibition is the worst thing that you can do to humans. It's terrible to like put people in jail for that. So that's what we're trying to, I guess, to change and to share with everyone.
So the status there, the Senate passed a law that would have regulated marijuana, but I know activists were not happy with that law, but it never got picked up by the Chamber of Deputies, like our House of Representatives. And so
Correct.
then didn't the Chamber of Deputies draft a proposed law as well to legalize marijuana? But it hasn't gone through to get to the Senate. And then what does the president there say? You want to tell our audience how?
The president says no. So basically, you need the three powers to be in aligned. So it's the senators and the diputados, which I'm not sure which is equivalent in the states, but and then the president has to say. So the Senate they made it was actually a very good law that they made. And then the diputados made an even better one, which was like going to take away possession and these kind of things. But then they never got together on both documents, so they just literally failed the deadline. And
in the American political system, that's called reconciliation between the two different houses in a bicameral legislature.
Exactly. So they didn't get together, and mainly it's because of this, because they're still limiting the amount of plants that you can grow. They're limiting the possession that you can have. They're limiting many, many things. And a human right, you cannot limit. It's like, how much water can you drink? How much? So to some people, we relate it, I guess, closer to alcohol. If you go to the liquor store, they won't ask you for a registration. They won't ask you to sign up somewhere. They won't give you a limit on how much alcohol you can buy. There are laws that you cannot drink and drive and these kind of things, but it's your human right to buy as much alcohol as you want, and you can store it all at one go if you want, and it has to be the same with cannabis. So it's our human right, but they're saying that if we're in possession of over 2 kilograms of flour, you automatically go to jail. If you're in possession of over 200 grams, you get how do you call it, an investigation put on you. So that for us is not a legalization. If you still incriminate people, it goes against your human rights. So I guess we're gonna fight this until the end, because I guess the U.S. does, I think they don't subscribe to human rights. You subscribe to civil rights. And the difference of that is that I guess the U.S. can pick you up at any moment and boom, throw you into Guantanamo, and that's it, and you'll never come out. But human rights actually protect us from those kind of behaviors from our governments.
Exactly.
If we know in Latin America that our governments are a bit fragile, sometimes to call it in a certain way, and then they all of a sudden change the laws, and they go and change laws that go against the population, against civilians, and they put people in jail unnecessarily, just like we're doing with cannabis. So I hope we can really push this human rights. I hope we can push it in other countries, that other countries also follow the same path, because once again, it's just a plant, and it's a plant that gives you so much: houses. You can even make electricity nowadays, or batteries with it, clothing, medicine. It's the future. So thank you for everything, because hopefully we can further all the work that you do over there, and everything that you've done for the people. And now if we can couple that with our human right, wow, we can really, really change the world.
Yeah, that's critical. And I think this plant, it's the oldest crop, really. There's no other crop that's been cultivated as long as cannabis. There's evidence that it's been cultivated going back 25,000 years. And so, and maybe more than that. And it's the most productive crop in a lot of different categories, not just one category, but a lot of different categories. So fuel, fiber, food, and medicine. And it's been a long road to get that out there, a long road to educate. And that's why this show's been going on for 25 years. We've done some of it. I appreciate you coming on. Stephen Clarke, you're in Mexico and you have a company, Heaven Grown. Is it Heaven Grown or just Heaven Grown?
Heavengrown.com. Well, the company's called Heaven Grown, but the website's heavengrown.com.
Yeah, and so you've been building buildings with hemp and bamboo, I think. And what was the other fiber you're using? Coconut? Yeah. And
yeah.
so
that's also one of the things that we're trying to push, because as it's your human right, you can basically grow hemp, you can grow as much cannabis as you want and make a house and make clothing. And so this basically puts the plant back in power of the people, and not corporations, not governments, not pharmaceuticals, not regulations. I'm not saying that they shouldn't participate. Obviously, everybody's welcome with the plant. That's part of what the plant brings. We're trying to heal the planet, bring people together, have better communication, at least have some peace between humans. So, but it's crucial that people have something, because once again, Mexico, we have 60 million people under the poverty line. Government's not going to help them. NGOs are not going to help them. The only way they're going to help them is, I guess, if they have the information and the knowledge to grow the plant and to make their houses and to make their food. Because then you even make an industry. Once you have your house and the whole town has a house, if you keep on growing and making bricks, we have a huge demand for construction in Mexico. But we're also in this catch-22 that we need to capture carbon, and we need to do it very quick all over the world if we don't want to start seeing some terrible disasters going along. So that's why it's a perfect plant. You can capture tons and tons and tons of CO2, and you leave it locked up in the carbon, in houses, in bioplastics, in so many applications. So really, that's the call that we're trying to get people on board. That we if we want to help the world, if we want to help the planet, if we want to have good ecosystems, if we want to have biodiversity, we need to lock up all that carbon that we've displaced into the atmosphere. And one of the few plants that will do it is hemp. We don't have to grow. We'll eventually have to regrow our forests. We'll eventually have to do all these things. But as a transition, it's a great plant to give us that healing. So that's why I think it's imperative that it's in the hands of the people and not so much corporations and governments, because they've had the power, and to a certain extent, part of this damage is a responsibility that they're not taking account, or they're not becoming responsible for. So I think if we want to heal the next generations, or like they say, for the next 7 generations, that we need to make sure that people are good. Hemp is one of the best plants for that, and coconut and bamboo, and it's basically just returning back to nature, coupling ourselves and being, I guess, being in equilibrium with nature or in the same frequency.
So your company, Heaven Grown, you're working right now. What are your current projects, and what's in the near future for you?
Right now, we're trying to get some hemp growing out over here with this paperwork. The only thing is that we're trying to stabilize the genetic, because most hemp genetics are for northern latitudes.
Right.
So we're working on stabilizing that first so that we can have a good plant out here, good biomass. And we're also currently working in Colombia. As Colombia has all the regulations to export, we can now export to the markets of Europe, to the markets of the US. And Colombia still has great soil. All the water there that we use is captured from the rain, and that's part of the laws that Colombia has. So we think it's a fantastic, I guess, proposal, because at the end, the quality of the water, the quality of the soil, the quality of the air really makes a difference in the quality of the flower. So we're trying to export some CBD flowers, but mainly we're trying to show people that with the waste of all this industry, we can make houses, we can make clothing, and we can make bioplastics, because the modern cannabis industry, unfortunately, has one of the biggest carbon footprints in the world. All this new packaging, all this new, and by law, because you have to have all these crazy boxes. And even in Canada, for example, you go to the cannabis store and buy a gram or an eighth, 3.5 grams, and they come in a huge container inside a box. So all that plastic, all that paper, all that trash, it doesn't make sense. And then when you go to the growing, how people are growing, at least now they're changing to LED lights, but before it was all HPS and the, how you call it, the metal halides. Those things are not very easily recyclable. The nutrients that they use, a lot of them, you can't recycle that plastic. There's a very high carbon footprint behind it. So we need to also make sure that this new cannabis industry doesn't become like all the other industries in the world that just damage it and it's all about the money. We need to make sure that we are sustainable, have a good life cycle analysis, how we use our water, how we recycle everything that we use, all our nutrients, not to have runoffs into the water systems, because all these things, even though it sounds great that you have a new economy, but we have to be careful of our practices, because that's really what's harming the world. It's not about eating meat or not eating meat, or it's how we grow our meat, how we grow our food, how instead of having 6 cows in 1 hectare, we put 300 of them, And it's the same thing that's kind of happening with cannabis, that we're starting to shift resources, energy, things that can be used for humans, for eating, for these things, just to have massive, massive complexes to grow cannabis. And they're using 20 megawatts of power. 20 megawatts could power a little town in Mexico, It's like, so those are the things that we need to make sure that it's our human right, that it's sustainable, and that we can make an example in this industry so that other people can follow.
I'm really proud that you're out there pioneering that. The buildings I've seen you construct there outside of Mexico City and in Mexico City, and the photos I've seen elsewhere are very well done. And like I said, I was amazed at the time how the finish on the walls was like glass there in that one facility.
They're beautiful, and those techniques are just the old Roman techniques. That's how humans have built for many, many, many years. It's just in the past years we changed our style of construction for supposedly something that was better and stronger, but at the end it's not. The earthquakes have shown us that. Like we tell people, earthquakes don't kill people. It's the tons of concrete that we specify on top of our heads that comes down that really hurts us. So if we can change all those materials for something that's even, we can call it better because it's more efficient. Hempcrete is many, many times better than concrete in terms of a living material. Concrete is fantastic for certain applications, but for houses, one of the best materials is hempcrete. And really the formula is not something that we invented or the French developed. This comes from the Romans made 2,000 years ago, and they probably learned it from somebody else. You know?
Yeah, I don't even know how far back it goes. I mean, hundreds of years before the Romans in Italy, there was the Etruscan civilization. There's so many different civilizations that have fallen by the wayside and aren't recorded. So this is prehistoric knowledge.
Exactly. So all we're doing now is just really proposing a more sustainable material for building, and it resists earthquakes. You can grow it yourself. That's one of the best things is you can grow your house. So you change the concept of going to the store for your house. You literally, or like to the store, the construction store to buy your materials. You literally grow your materials. So that to me is one of the best things that we can do nowadays, especially like I tell you for countries like Mexico, Latin America, because like they say, necessity is the mother of invention.
And they could grow their seeds as well, take their seeds, press the oil out, and get up to 300 gallons of oil an acre that they can put in the tractor to take care of the farm. You know, there's all of these. That's why they made it illegal to start with. It's those petrochemical, pharmaceutical, military, industrial, transnational, corporate, elite, fascist sons of a bitches that brought us this marijuana prohibition. And we have to fix this world so that our ancestors have something at least as, better future.
Exactly, Paul. And thank you for all the work that you've done and all the people that you've inspired. Thanks to everything that you've done, like Newton said, we were able to stand on the shoulders of giants. So
yeah,
when it was the worst prohibition, when it was the worst days, you were always pushing the information forward. And now we're just at that point that it's opening up, and not only opening up just in any way, but it's a human right. So in that sense, it's wonderful times. It would have been better for Mexico if they would have gone full legal, but no worries, we'll keep on fighting, and hopefully we can share as much of this information to everybody, that it's our human right, that we can grow our houses, on our food, and our energy, and our clothes, and our plastics, so we can enter this new future in a good way, and not at least save what we can of the planet, like you say, for the rest, for our ancestors, for the kids, and everybody else.
That's our duty, I do believe. And so Stephen Clarke at heavengrown.com, look him up. Thanks for coming on, Stephen. We'll see you next time somewhere down the Hempman Road. I know I'm going to Cannabis in October. I think that's the next thing I have on, but I think it's mainly for doctors and nurses.
Nice. Well, we'll definitely see you. If you come out to Mexico, it'll be fantastic seeing you and getting that vape again, man.
I'll bring
All right, man.
Talk to you then.
Thank you very much, Paul. Have a great day.
Yeah. Bye-bye. I'd like to welcome back on the show Dan Herr of Jack Herr Brands, the Jack Herr Foundation, Jack Herr Golf Tournament, and you're working on a museum in LA as well, right?
Working toward a brick and mortar museum.
All right. So you're up in Oregon. Thanks for coming in. Most of our interviews haven't been in studio since the pandemic, so you're one of the first ones.
I'm happy to be one of the first ones. I'm sure there's going to be many, many more to come.
Yeah,
just to catch up on things.
Yeah. Well, we probably will get back in our studio at some point, but we'll still keep doing interviews online because not everybody can be in Portland at 8:00 on Friday night, and that's how it had been with our live show. That's the way when your dad came on the show, it was in the studio at 8:00 on Friday night. So you've recently come up with a PowerPoint presentation about that to talk about the brand.
Yeah, we're just as part of our company's branding and imaging, it's just telling the story of why this brand, why my father, and really telling his story through the way that I grew up, the things that I saw, and the experiences that I had, which translates into my creating the Jack Herr brand, and having that be a representation of not the singular thing that my father was interested in, but something that helps to elevate the consciousness of folks through education, because everything that we create has educational elements in it. And I want people to not just think about the consumption of cannabis, but its understanding. And we do that through our packaging, through the imagery that's part of it. And we're hope that as they enjoy the products that we put out, that they start looking into the educational aspects that my father was really known for, and his activism. And I want people to go back and actually, look at what cannabis's history, how important it was to the world.
You were just showing me your packaging. I will get some photos of this, but you want to show this is a package of flowers. So the camera's right there a little bit. There, that's pretty clear. And so you open that up, and there's, is it 5 pre-rolled?
It's inside is six half-gram pre-rolls.
So you do 3
So-
grams worth of.
So as you go through your pre-rolls and you get to the bottom of the pack,
Yeah,
it also has
a little.
the history of how cannabis circumnavigated the globe, and in which century or in which millennium it made it from one country to another, or one continent to another. And it really just shows how this plant became everybody's plant, like it should today.
Yeah.
Cannabis should be, or at least this, should be a part of everybody's life, whether it's through consumption of cannabis, or whether it should be the wearing of hemp clothing or hemp products. We should really be looking at how to utilize this plant to its full purpose, and we're hoping to share that with the world through our products.
A Native American activist just been telling me how the increase in carbon in the atmosphere, which has gone up about 50% over the past 100 years, how that is increasing the growth of plants, but that the plants aren't having trouble adapting. So the forest that he's native to in eastern Washington, the plants are changing and the insects are gone. And another fellow who's been on the show, Paul von Hartmann, talks about how cannabis terpenes can replace a lot of the terpenes in the atmosphere, and that has a climatic effect. The fact that we've wiped out so much of the forest and we don't have these trees exhaling these terpenes into the atmosphere has a pretty dramatic effect. Cannabis, of course, has a lot of terpenes and could help stop those sort of.
It's almost like the natural sunscreen to some of them. It gets emitted into the atmosphere, and hopefully, basic understanding it sort of creates this barrier between sun damages to the Earth's surface. And we figure out how to do everything we can in order to change how we will live and survive and thrive in the future. My father from my very early age always was saying that cannabis and hemp was going to be the savior of mankind, or there would be no mankind.
Yeah,
and
just he did in his very last speech, and he delivered that message to millions, really, around the world. His book was a top seller in Germany, and translated into, I don't know the number of languages.
Now I believe it is 6 languages, not all of them authorized, but the message is getting out in multiple languages. Officially, there is the German, there is the English, there is the Japanese, but the Spanish version and the French version currently are not authorized products, but the information is still legitimate.
So yeah, and also on your packaging you have the Chinese symbol or word for him, and the Egyptian one as well. I thought that was pretty. I've seen the Chinese one used, but I've never seen anybody use the Egyptian.
Well, we want to show how long this plant has been a part of all of ours development as a culture, as a being, as participants on this planet. That if you can go back 5 to 10,000 years and see the cannabis leaf depicted above what were considered the Egyptian gods, that you understand that this plant has been around an extremely long time, and it's been a part of not only our development, but of our safety, our security, our development, our wealth and health and well-being. That that this plant was so important that it would be depicted above the heads of these gods, that it would be used to create the products that we need and use every day. And these are the things that, I grew up starting to understand as a young adult. And now, as we get further into this new millennium, you know, the the necessity to really embrace this plant to its full utility is really becoming more apparent. When we
especially for food, paper, fuel. Not just the drug aspects. The drug aspects.
it's one of the
important.
smallest. It's one of the smallest
Yeah.
necessity things, but necessity nonetheless. But it's one of the smaller aspects of the use of this plant compared to all of the different things that we use in our lives and all of the things that could be touched by cannabis instead of petrochemical products or tree-made paper products or
That are toxic too. And the hemp alternatives are not toxic.
or
You
at
go
least
around
less
any-
toxic,
Yeah, well, if you look at hemp oil and seed oil,
not toxic.
it's not toxic.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
if we had an Exxon Valdez size spill of cannabis oil,
Yeah.
we really wouldn't have to spend billions of dollars trying to clean it up.
No, it would enhance the environment. The animals
So-
will be coming in to eat it.
So there's a lot to be said for really embracing its more industrial uses. But one of the things that are immediately apparent is days like day before yesterday here in Portland, where we're
Yeah.
reaching 115, 116 degrees for the first time in its history here. And
There are actually only two other cities in U.S. history that had ever been hotter than Portland was this week.
Yeah.
Las Vegas was 117 once, and Phoenix was 118 once.
Yeah.
Now they recorded a temperature in Canada that's higher than that.
and
121.
it was 130 degrees in Death Valley just
Yeah.
a couple of weeks ago.
Yeah, first time that threshold above the 120 mark.
It's
It reached
just
130.
it's just absolutely absurd the things that are happening. And is it just climate change? And is climate change potentially affected by the fact that we've tried to eradicate a plant that could actually have changed this from ever even happening to begin with? Had we embraced hemp and cannabis in the early 1900s as the industrial revolution was starting to really take hold and the products from petrochemicals were being expanded, had we embraced cannabis at that same time and used the last 80 or 90 years to create the infrastructure that we now need with cannabis, where would we be today as a society, as a country, and as a global community? Would we be going through these fights, or would we be living in a really different, amazing, time? Instead, we're spending our time trying to figure out how to save ourselves and this planet. Because really, it's really ourselves that we're trying to save. Because once we're all gone through extinction, because that's where we're leading ourselves to. Once we're gone, the Earth will take care of itself. So when we say we're taking care of the Earth, that's pretty arrogant, I think, thinking. But if we're talking about saving ourselves on this planet, then we do need to think fast, and we do need to think smart, and we do need to think cannabis.
And that's one of the things that your dad was the pioneer in talking about, was that it provides this environmentally sustainable pathway, and there aren't others out. And it's amazing how he spread that, campus to campus, city to city.
Tailgate to tailgate.
Yeah, tailgate. And on Venice Beach, as you mentioned, that was just one example of his travels. And the hemp tour, I know we've got videos we've shown about that. Pop a few of them in here too.
There's my dad was certainly a visionary and a revolutionary individual. And many of the things that I was hearing and listening to come from him as a young adult, I was always thinking, "Oh Jesus, Dad, you're fucking insane." And when you look at the next 30 or 40 years of his life, he was a bit on the crazy side. But the one everlasting thing through that is that he wasn't wrong, and that his dedication, determination, and his unwillingness to take no for an answer, and to continue to fight every day for this plant and the opportunity for it to serve us as well as us to serve it. I think is an extraordinary legacy that he's left for all of us to continue as we move forward and trying to decipher how to use this plant, where to use this plant, and how to develop all of the technologies that it will allow us to bring forth because of its understanding. And I hope we continue to do that over the next 5, 10, and 20 years.
It's amazing to see young people pioneering these new industries today in America for paper, for cloth, for for insulation,
Battery technology.
yeah, the graphene technology and energy. Yeah, that's very promising. Something that of course we didn't think of earlier.
I mean, think of all of the batteries that we are now discarding around the world en masse, whether it be from our automobiles or our phones or our computers or, God knows how many different other applications that we could be, creating another type of battery technology that would be potentially recyclable and renewable
It doesn't take rare earth. They're going around spoiling the environment, digging up lithium and these other rare earth metals for technology when the environment can provide a much more sustainable, less toxic path forward with hemp. They've been giving out degrees for petrochemical engineers for decades. What if the people who've been studying the petrochemical, oil they pumped out and turning it into all these different products, what if they had been focusing on the hemp oil
where
molecule?
would we be today?
Yeah, exactly.
How much time have we lost? We've lost nearly 100 years of development and understanding, and things that even 50 years from now, we think about what's being developed now. 50 years from now, the stuff that we're seeing now, we're going to be like, oh, well, we're quantum leaps above that, past that, and I'm excited for that. I mean, I'm not going to be around for it, but the people today that are being, being, inspired.
Will be around. It's changing pretty quick.
Well, God bless
We
you.
need to make it.
But I think the youth and the imagination of the folks that are embracing this plant and really expanding its platform and the different things that it can do today, and really looking to expand what could be tomorrow is one of, I think, I want to say for myself and my family, one of the proudest things that we can take from my father's energy on this planet, because the things that he had done, this book that he had written, the voice that was really ever present for many, many, many years in the cannabis and hemp space has really just
it's a proud legacy.
Yeah, so because that energy has gone out, and those ripples continue to come back, and I continue to see it in the eyes and in the thoughts and the ideas of the youth that is now going to lead cannabis into this next decade and this next 50 years into the next millennium, and where will we be as a global community at that point? And I'm excited for that development. I'm hoping to see as much as I can over the next 10 or 20 years.
So you started the Jack Hare brands in California.
Yes.
And you rolled out products. We talked a few weeks ago about how you won for this distillate cartridge. Thanks for bringing me a nice sample. We'll throw up some photos. Let's see. There. Here's box. In addition to some flour, a little bit of flour. In there.
And if it doesn't say the original Jack Hare on a product or have my father's name or image,
so that's
it is not.
That's the one that's branded by you folks.
Right. It's the officially licensed product. And so we have licensed to other legitimate companies that have taken and shared our name with their brands, which has been remarkably fulfilling for us as a brand. And we're looking to encourage the relationships with other folks.
So you're here in Oregon trying to
we're expanding the brand
figure out how to get into this market with some Jack Hare brands as well.
Yeah, Oregon is just starting to understand consumer packaged good branding, and it's still in the transition.
Smaller compared to California,
and it's still in the transitional phase. But it's time to share the actual real original Jack Hare brand here and create a niche here in the community that my father and yourself fought so hard from the early 80s up till even right now with regards to the legalization and access to both medicinal and recreational sides of cannabis and what you've done here. Originally, it was OMI.
Yeah,
And
we both moved here to help the Oregon Marijuana Initiative, which apparently kicked off about 1980. And when I met your dad, we talked about how, and it was September of 1982, there were newspaper articles about how they failed to make the ballot in Oregon here. And then 2 years later, we were both here working on the 84 campaign.
I still have a picture of you, my father, and I know you know the other person that was sitting out in front of the Third Eye
Oh, yeah.
shop.
John Sajak.
John Sajak.
John was the founder of the Oregon Marijuana Initiative and spokesperson. Yeah. There's a real good video that was made locally during the turn-in of those signatures on November 1st, 1985. Your dad and I are in the background, but John and a number of other people talked about it that day. And that was just the second time that marijuana legalization was voted on. But your dad had also worked on the first one in 72. And
Prop 19.
yeah, the first Prop 19. That was the first one. And we just kept going until we won. You're in our office here. This is where we worked to put Measure 80 on the ballot in 2012 and worked on the 2014 campaign as well. So
This is a historical place.
petition.
I'm
our
so
petition headquarters.
glad that I'm visiting here and sitting with you. I'm really really humbled to be here.
Thanks for coming. And thanks for talking about your products and your legacy and your work. What else would you like to tell our audience here today?
Just educate yourself as much as you can, as much as you have time for. Educate yourself about hemp and cannabis and all of its possibilities. And as things continue to develop, both industrially and medicinally and recreationally, from the recreational medicinal side, remember it's not the THC that's in the product that takes you on your destination. It is the terpene profile. So don't get caught up in THC levels. Get caught up in the quality of the cannabis you're smoking or ingesting. Other than that, educate, spread the word, and destigmatize everywhere. Many blessings to you all.
Well, thanks for carrying on your dad's legacy, Dan. I'm happy to see you here. Here's a little fist bump up here, and keep it up. I look forward to having you back at some point in the future and seeing your brand make it here in Oregon. I know you're breaking into the Colorado market now too.
Yeah, this year in September, October, we'll be launching the first authentic original Jack cover in Oregon. In Colorado, pardon me. And I'm working with an extraordinary group out there called Los Sueños Farms, and we're going to hopefully, bring great product and education, or more education to a very diverse and developed cannabis market out there. And I'm really looking forward to the future.
Good work. Thank you. We are too. We've been here with Dan Harrer, talking about Jack Harrer Brands and the Jack Harrer nonprofit group. Thanks for coming on again. And remember to help restore hemp.
Every day.